Well, if you're wondering why farmers are so concerned about their farm finances right now, they really just can't catch a break. It's not just because corn prices are below break even for most. It's the fact input prices are so high.
I never thought I was going to lose this much money, this fast.
The fields stretching across America's Midwest lie silent. From Iowa to Indiana, harvesters sit idle, coated in dust. This year's crop is almost abandoned, as corn prices fall below $3.50 a bushel, so low that hardly anyone bothers to go out into the fields. Their biggest export market, China, has stopped placing orders. Shipments bound for the port of New Orleans have been turned back. Multi-million-dollar contracts vanished overnight, leaving farmers confused and weighed down by mounting losses. Now they face two grim choices: let the crops rot in the fields or harvest at a loss, adding fuel to the fire. The U.S. Department of Agriculture (USDA) has just cut local food assistance programs, including school meal plans, support for indigenous communities, and food banks that depend heavily on domestic crops. While American growers struggle to stay afloat north of the border, Canada is quietly but effectively stepping in. Canada is signing major trade agreements with key economies like Japan, South Korea, and several European nations. As U.S. agriculture sinks into crisis, Ottawa is steadily building its reputation as a reliable grain supplier, an emerging player in the global race for food security. While U.S. farmers watch unsold corn pile up, Canada is cashing in. What triggered this sudden collapse, and why has Ottawa been able to move so fast? At its core, the crisis comes from trade policies that have blocked American corn exports. It started when Washington imposed tariffs worth millions of dollars on cargo vessels built in China. The impact went far beyond shipping. The blow hit America's agricultural backbone directly. Freight costs through the Gulf of Mexico jumped nearly 25%, pushing the annual cost of moving grain to international markets up by almost $1 billion, a steep price for a sector already under pressure. Across the Pacific, things look no better. Container rates have skyrocketed, climbing past $5,000 per unit in just 2 months. That's not only more than double the post-COVID crisis peak, but it also makes us export efforts almost impossible. Meanwhile, Canada, free from these tariff barriers, has quickly stepped in to take its southern neighbor's place. But rising transport costs are only part of the problem. Another heavy blow came in March 2025, when the Federal Grain Inspection Service raised pesticide residue inspection fees for exports by 40%. Since then, any shipment of corn leaving the U.S. must pass far stricter chemical testing than before. If a load fails inspection, it is stopped mid-route, meaning farmers lose both money and effort entirely. Costs keep piling up, yet exports remain stuck. The number of barges moving down the Mississippi has fallen 16% compared with the average. The port of New Orleans now looks like a massive floating warehouse, with more than 180 ships sitting idle, waiting for empty containers or overdue approvals. Corn sits piled at the docks, soaked by rain until it turns moldy and black. Farmers can do nothing but watch their future earnings slip away. Each week of delay costs them about 27 cents per bushel. In states like Iowa and Indiana, where production is high and stockpiles are massive, losses are spiraling at a staggering pace. As shipping congestion worsens, global markets are changing their expectations. Buyers no longer want just clean goods, they want them sustainable, transparent, and fully traceable from field to port. This past February, Mexico suddenly announced a ban on genetically modified corn imports. Within 24 hours, livestock feed producers worldwide updated contracts to include similar GMO restrictions. The move caught Washington off guard, since more than 90% of U.S. cornfields are genetically modified. Almost overnight, the United States found itself dropped from priority supplier lists without warning. Meanwhile, Canada had everything ready. The Prairie Trace system, powered by blockchain technology, tracks every kernel of corn from the moment it is planted until it leaves the port. That transparency, combined with low emissions and a reputation for purity, has turned Canada into a highly sought-after supplier. Just weeks later, Ottawa signed a series of multi-billion-dollar export agreements with leading markets such as Japan, South Korea, and the EU. In contrast, spot prices for corn in the U.S. Midwest collapsed to $3.45 per bushel, the lowest level since 2016. At the same time, Manitoba corn, certified as green, was fetching as much as $4.20 per bushel. The price gap is real, and it shows that importers are not waiting for the U.S. to change course. The shift is clear, and it is anything but gentle. Contracts once signed between international buyers and Midwestern cooperatives have been wiped clean along the rivers. Barges sit idle, grain elevators remain packed to the brim, while global buyers steadily redirect their attention to Canada. At New Orleans, once a vital export gateway, America's role in the global grain trade is fading into the background. The market has made a new choice. Customers are willing to pay more for Canadian corn. not just because of price, but because they gain something more valuable: trust. Every shipment leaving Canada meets all the modern standards of agricultural trade: non-GMO, fully traceable, and genuinely clean. Meanwhile, the ethanol market, once a lifeline for U.S. corn growers, has started to falter. The U.S. Energy Information Administration recently reported that ethanol plants in the Midwest are running at only about 87.8% of capacity. At least 25 plants have temporarily shut down, leaving more than 1 billion gallons of production idle. At Valero's plant in Columbus, Nebraska, night shifts have been cut, and more than 100 workers laid off, as corn demand continues to shrink. Pressure on rural communities, already struggling, has only grown, from the storage silos of Iowa to the loading docks of Illinois and the processing facilities of Nebraska. Every link in the corn production and consumption chain is breaking apart. Corn, once seen as the gold of the Midwest, has now become a burden, dragging down an entire agricultural system that was once a pillar of American pride. While the U.S. wrestles with internal troubles, Canada has quietly built a structured advantage. Each container leaving port carries not only goods, but credibility. Canadian corn comes with solid proof, blockchain traceability, carbon emission monitoring, and chemical transparency. Nothing complicated, just proof of a clean product and the trust it inspires. That trust is turned into real value. A June 2025 report from Ontario farmers showed that old crop corn was selling for as much as $1.87 per bushel above Chicago futures. Even new crop corn prices were at least 18% higher. Feed mills in Asia and Europe are now willing to pay extra for products they can trust for quality. This past March, Canada and South Korea signed an organic equivalency agreement, allowing Canadian grain to be recognized directly at South Korean ports without extra inspections. Within weeks, cooperatives in Ontario secured long-term supply contracts lasting up to 5 years. Saskatchewan moved fast as well. Thanks to a weak Canadian dollar and U.S. involvement in tariff disputes, the province expanded its reach into markets such as Japan and the Netherlands. With U.S. goods facing a 25% tariff, international buyers shifted course, choosing Canada. Stable, low-key, trustworthy partner. Export Development Canada also stepped in to support this trend. The government hasn't stood idle. Farmers now have access to insurance packages for each export shipment, along with reimbursement for cold chain costs to ensure grain keeps its low-emission certification. These support tools aren't hidden. They are presented openly as clear competitive advantages. Even the National Transportation Network has been adjusted. Rail lines from Vancouver now extend further into the Midwest, allowing grain to return from Asia by train at competitive freight rates. In the same week, a new logistics agreement was signed, forcing the U.S. Department of Agriculture to acknowledge that grain vessel bookings from Gulf ports had dropped 14% year-over-year. American exports are slowing, contracts are being shortened, shipment volumes are shrinking, and perhaps most troubling, a prolonged silence is coming from overseas buyers. For us producers, that silence is as good as rejection. Meanwhile, Canada is not just claiming a larger slice of the market, it is building something many countries have only begun to imagine: a true national brand, an image tied to transparency and readiness for inspection at any time. The competition is no longer just about bumper crops or poor harvests. It is about how the crops are grown, how they are tracked, and how they reach the world. As international standards increasingly tilt toward green, from emissions to traceability, those who move first clearly hold the advantage, while American farmers worry over overflowing silos and falling prices. Orders in Toronto keep coming steadily, without interruption. There was a time when U.S. corn was the backbone of global agriculture, present in everything from livestock feed to processed foods, but now that very product, once the benchmark, risks being pushed off the menu. The rejection of multiple U.S. corn shipments is a serious warning, a turning point the trade community cannot ignore. A supply chain once built on America's dominant position is now more fragile than ever. The domino effect has begun, and corn is only the first piece to fall. Next, soybeans. With 92% of U.S. soybean acreage planted with genetically modified varieties, Seed Europe, one of the continent's leading agricultural standard bodies, has struck the U.S. off its list of low-carbon suppliers. The fallout doesn't stop there. As feed costs rise due to a lack of compliant supply, the entire dairy sector is being dragged down. In a market where green equals advantage, small farms will be the first casualties. They simply cannot keep up. The beef industry is not immune. Every pound of high-emission corn used to feed cattle now counts as a major strike in the eyes of global consumers, who are increasingly mindful of the carbon footprint behind every product they buy. Meanwhile, Canada, along with Australia, has pledged to reach net zero emissions by 2030. That message alone is strong enough to attract global buyers, even before the U.S. has time to respond. Today's reality puts Washington at a clear crossroads. undertake sweeping reform, or continue down a path of deeper decline. If it chooses reform, the U.S. will have to dismantle its protective tariffs, give farmers access to sustainable farming tools, make its traceability system transparent, and formalize carbon scoring as a national standard. Politically, difficult, yes. But the only path to restoring lost credibility on the global trade stage is reform. If, instead, Washington doubles down on protectionism, clings to outdated inspection procedures, and props up market failures with subsidies, then the only road left leads to decline, just as outdated policies once pushed industrial plants to the brink. In agriculture, the cost will be even harsher. Canada will not only capture more market share, but also increase value with premium products, making their mark on tables from Tokyo to Paris. This shift is no longer a forecast. It is happening before our very eyes. Shipment by shipment, vessel by vessel, dollar by dollar, all are drifting northward, while us farmers wait for aid. In Toronto, the market clock keeps ticking. Each tick is another deal signed. The question now is, how much longer will Washington wait before making changes, or will its agriculture continue sliding into doubt and delay? Share your thoughts in the comments, and see you in the next article.